Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Valene Gresham. It is true, I am in Paris, France. I'm not French, I'm American. I am from Los Angeles. I just moved here in September. So today I wanted to talk about how the global pandemic has kind of changed the role of mental health internationally and what it's looking like now, and just kind of have a conversation about this because I think it's really important for us to sort of acknowledge that it's changing a bit. I think the first thing that we could acknowledge globally is the use of technology has soared during this pandemic. The use of telehealth, the use of all of these different platforms. A lot of mental health clinicians have really taken initiative to have a social media presence, to do Facebook Live and Instagram Live and all of these different sort of like question answer sessions, Zoom sessions to keep people connected during the pandemic. At least here in France, I didn't experience the pandemic in the US because I didn't go back home, I stayed here. In France, during the height of the pandemic, we could not go outside for longer than 1 hour a day. And when we went out for our 1 hour, we had to have a piece of paper permission slip printed. So if the police stopped us, we could show them that we had the right to be outside. We couldn't just come and go. And on this permission slip, we had to write whether we were going to the doctor, whether we were going to the grocery store, whether we could go outside for this 1 hour run, or you could go to the pharmacy and you could walk the dog. And it was for 1 hour total. So if you walk the dog for 1 hour the first time, the dog does not get to go back out for another hour. It's 1 hour. So you can imagine in a place like Paris where the apartments are the size of everyone's bathroom. I mean, they're very, very tiny. And you have people who are married, who haven't spent a lot of time with their partners over the years, who have kids. Their kids have been going to soccer practice and rugby practice and after school and before school and daycare and all these camps. Now everyone is very cooped up in this tiny, tiny little space all together for 23 hours a day. So no access to friends, no access to family members or any type of network other than the family system, which initially the thought is, oh, this is nice. We get to spend time with family, but there's also no privacy. There's no privacy to get dressed. There's no privacy to do basic things like just to have a bite to eat. You can't be outside for longer than an hour. So it was a very big thing. And I think a lot of people hadn't experienced anything like that before. So with technology came this influx of patients coming to therapy that probably ordinarily would not come to therapy because they're getting so desperate to kind of express these emotions in a safe space and not feeling safe enough to talk about what the pandemic has done to them because they're feeling a bit like their feelings are invalid. So having a hard time feeling validated during a time when the whole world is going through it. It's not just me going through it. It's not just you going through it. So how do you feel safe talking about being tired of your husband or being tired of your kids? Is it even okay to say you're tired of your kids? So that's something that was a very big shift, I think, internationally when it comes to this pandemic. Going back to technology, one of the things I wanted to mention is that your elderly population. If your elderly population felt isolated before, they absolutely feel isolated now because many of them don't have computers, they don't have smartphones, they don't have tablets and iPads, and no way to connect. And certainly during a pandemic, it's not the time to get them connected, right? Because we want to keep our elderly population as protected as possible from strange people coming in and out of the home. So that was a huge thing. We actually had a task force here in France that was, which I don't know that this was the smartest thing, but they were kind of going to these homes of the elderly to kind of like connect with them, but through like the doors, through the windows, not like one-on-one connection, because we obviously want to keep them away from people. But that was a huge, I think, area that was completely missed. Because the first instinct, at least I have a private practice here, and in my private practice, the first thing I did when there was a pandemic was, okay, I have all the platforms. I have Zooms and for healthcare, Facebook, Snapchat, I have WhatsApp, I have Instagram, I have a Skype, I have any platform you need to find me online to talk, I can talk. But what about someone who's 85 years old who doesn't even know how to turn on a computer? My grandmother doesn't know how to turn on a computer. So it was very, very difficult. So that was one of the huge things. The kind of problem that we were facing a lot of times were, at least from my practice and some of the practice of other clinicians that I've spoken with, we talked about lots of divorces, lots of breakups, lots of, those two mainly I want to talk about because I think it's interesting. I think at the beginning of the pandemic, lots of jokes were kind of made about people breaking up, people not staying together. But in reality, when you think about the length of time we spend at work in a day, before I moved to Paris, I was working in a prison and I was working a 10-hour day. Sometimes it would turn into an 11-hour day. And then I had other things I would do on the side. So if you're spending 50, 60 hours working, and then you're spending 8 hours a night sleeping, how much, and then if you're in LA, then you're spending equal amount of time in traffic. How much time are you actually spending with your partner? Not as much as we all like to think we are. And so when you remove those obstacles, the traffic, because you can't go out, the work hours, because you're forced to be in the same space with this person, what do you start to discover? You start to discover this person. And sometimes we don't like what we see because we've evolved over time into two different people that are just living together and coexisting together and not really in the same relationship. So imagine rediscovering your partner for 5 months straight with no break in an apartment that's 300, I guess it'll be like 300 square feet. That's a heavy burden to put on anyone. That's a heavy expectation to put on anyone. And these are two people that don't like each other. Imagine if it's two people that do like each other, and imagine spending 7 hours a day, or excuse me, 23 hours a day awake with someone that you do love. That's a lot. Now you're spending it 23 hours with someone that you're not even sure if you like that much. It creates a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of fear. It starts putting people in a place where they really have to start thinking about themselves and what it means to be in these kinds of relationships. Another thing that went, that at least here in France and a couple other states, because I talked to a couple of clinicians internationally to kind of gain their perspective as well, domestic violence went up a lot. It went up a lot. Everyone was at home. Child abuse, I know we just got out of the Bikers Against Child Abuse presentation. Child abuse, I don't know if they spoke about it, went up a lot during the pandemic. So all of these sort of like problems that were sort of displaced simply because people were busy, now they're not as busy. So that was something that really took a huge toll on people here and abroad. Another thing that I noticed was a huge impact. I don't think I mentioned it, but I'm also licensed in the UK, and so I have a couple of patients that are in the UK as well, is anxiety. I don't know if anyone has noticed their own anxiety level, but anxiety has just increased significantly during this pandemic. Not just, worry about the future, but just general anxiety, not being able to having control over your life experience, not having control over the future. If you're living as an expat, borders closing, it is an incredibly anxiety-provoking experience for someone if they are trying to get home and can't. One of the things that happened in New Zealand was you would have, and it wasn't just New Zealand, I just happened to have a friend that this happened to, but in lots of different countries. So imagine you took a job in Germany. And so your spouse is staying home to help with the final sale at the house, to get the kids, situated because it's, spring break and we want to have them finish their spring break and then start. You've decided, actually we'll let the kids stay in school until the end of May when summer starts, and then we'll join you. And then there's a pandemic, and then the borders close. Now your spouse is stuck at home in your old home, and you're in your new country, and you have no clue when you're going to be able to get back to your spouse. I actually have a case where this person left Paris in a panic right when they announced that our borders were going to be closing, thinking they would be gone for 2 weeks. Well, he went to his home country and got to his home country, and his home country not only closed the borders, but also closed the airport for the foreseeable future. There was no end date to when they were going to open. And in fact, France has been open, I want to say, since mid-May. His airport is still closed. So he wasn't able to finish the rest of his master's. He's paying rent on an apartment here in Paris that he cannot live in. The roommates, the contract on the apartment has ended. So the roommates have all moved out and had to move all of his. So life has moved on and he can't move anywhere, not based on anything that he's done. It's just simply because the government in his country has completely shut down and refuses to open for the foreseeable future. And that is the only details that they've provided. So anxiety is a light word to describe what's going on in people's lives right now. So, so anxiety, depression has been a very huge, I think if people were suffering with depression before, they're really suffering with depression now, and there has seemed to be globally this feeling of being exposed, because I think a lot of people were suffering with their depression in silence. They had behaviors and mannerisms that they were using to cope with their depression that maybe their partners didn't know about, their spouses didn't know about, their kids didn't know about. But when you were tucked away in a tiny space with not a lot of privacy, only one or two things are going to happen. You're either going to find a way to hide your depression because like through doing other things, or it's going to show. And you can't hide it for so long. I mean, when someone is depressed, the depression is going to show. So that has been something that has come out too. A lot of partners coming to therapy because they realize that their partner is depressed. And when they talk to their partner about it, the partner's like, I've been depressed for 15 years. They have no idea. So it goes back to this idea that we as a working class we spend so much time at work and so much time away from our family system that we think we know what's going on at home, but we really have no idea. Another thing that's been a huge kind of global side effect of this pandemic is financial hardship. Financial hardship has been another sort of huge topic in households that are really interfering with their ability to do basic things. So when you're thinking about things that people use to cope, sometimes it's therapy, sometimes it's massages, sometimes it's sports, it's gyms, it's all of these extra added expenses that you have in your budget. But when you are unemployed, or when you are just unable to make money, what's the first to go? The first to go are some of these luxury items. And so people are having to learn new ways to cope and new ways to adjust to what's going on in their lives because they just don't have the financial security to manage some of these things. So it's been a really interesting sort of experience to witness all of these sorts of things. And then being the therapist for all of these people and sort of seeing how these different issues are manifesting from the inside of lots of different cultures as well. The last thing I kind of want to talk about, which I think will impact all of us, whether you're a clinician or not, is how the global pandemic has impacted the mental health providers, how it's impacted us, We're spending 40, 50, 60 hours a day dedicating your life to helping other people feel better, to helping them find peace, to helping them cope. But one of the things, like I said, I surveyed a couple different international providers, and the unanimous kind of answer that everyone gave me is that they've been feeling, I don't know that I want to use the word burned out to describe it. Burnout could be one way to describe it. But there's been sort of like a acknowledgement of being a little bit not short-tempered, but having less tolerance for the smaller problems, if that makes sense. Like having a more difficult time validating the smaller problems, which in an ordinary therapeutic day, trained clinicians have no trouble doing this. But whenever you're talking to someone, you have one patient on Monday at 8 o'clock whose both parents just died because of coronavirus. Then at noon, you have a patient who is crying and sobbing because their kids can't go outside to play for longer than an hour. Both problems are valid, both problems are relevant, and as a trained clinician, it's your job to make your patients, help your patients feel validated and help them kind of explore ways to cope with their frustration. But you could see after 5 months of dealing with patients who have had death, who have had loss, who are going through divorces, some people had miscarriages during this pandemic, some people had stillbirths during this pandemic, and then you have the patient who's really upset that she can't go to Milwaukee to visit her mom. None of us can go to Milwaukee to visit our moms, right? So the clinicians have been reporting just like an overwhelming feeling of just having more difficulty validating some of the smaller problems. I'm saying smaller because we're in a safe space, but everyone's problem is equal, obviously, it's subjective. But this kind of like feeling that, keeping in mind, lots of clinicians are dealing with their own reactions to the pandemic and not really having the time to take care of themselves. So that has been one of the major things that I've noticed. There's been a lot of clinicians have been reporting an increased feeling of countertransference as well, really kind of noticing some of the experiences that their patients are having and their reaction to the experiences. So those were a couple of the things I noticed. Did anyone have any? Yes, Karina wrote, almost like being easily agitated, very easily agitated. That is a perfect way to describe it. It's kind of like, the experience would be like you're sitting in the room and your patient starts saying things like, my husband's complaining that I'm not cooking enough. And that is their sole purpose for coming to therapy, is their husband's complaining they're not cooking enough. And on a normal day, on a normal Tuesday, in the world of psychology, we could go so many different routes for why that is problematic in our patient's life and really help them find some insight and gain some clarity. In the world of Corona, it's very easy for a clinician to feel burdened or overwhelmed or have a reaction to this kind of patient. So I think it's really important for clinicians too, not just to take a look at how our patients are feeling and the quality of patients that we're having and how they've changed because of the pandemic, but really taking a look at yourself and doing some checking in with ourselves and seeing how we've changed as clinicians. A psychologist friend of mine, she described it as feeling life coachy. She said, I'm feeling a bit life coachy in that I'm being very directive and being very direct in how I'm giving these therapeutic interventions to patients instead of really asking the questions and getting the patients to look within. So it's really kind of an interesting phenomenon because it's impacting so many different people in many different ways. And if you know anything about anxiety and depression, depression can look the same in a string of people and it could look light years different in each person. And if you're not educated on it, and if your spouse and your children are not educated on it, you don't even know what to look for when you're looking for it in your family system. So it was really kind of an interesting sort of experience to watch. Does anyone have any questions? Christina, should I go through the chat?
I didn't see any questions. There's a lot of comments, so I don't know if anybody wants to be put into the breakout group. You guys can definitely discuss that after.
I want to jump in there right now. I want to jump in there and tell the doctor, man, I appreciate her so much with just acknowledging a lot of things that a lot of people are going to. And so, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, is it just me? And so with this Corona thing, everybody has had to come together. And I'm a loner by just period. I'm just good at that. Been 31 years in the Los Angeles Police Department, retired, and been retired since 2016. And I've been by myself. I just picked up a dog, a retired canine dog, and he has been just the best company for me. And he has took all of my anxiety and all that stuff away from me because he's kind of busy. So he needs me. And so I just enjoy his company. Even though I can't really talk to him, I give him some commands. But I want to throw a little joke in there because I don't feel so bad because I'm used to, I was over there in Paris. So that's the love city. So if they're going through it, I'm not feeling bad at all over here in Los Angeles, because we're all going through it. And here's the good thing about all of this that you're saying. this PTSD stuff that even for the clinicians that's going through.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe now is the time to start addressing it because it's been going on for a while. Everybody's pretty much burnt out with just about everything. We're just on the fast track. Everything with the technology, it makes it a little easier, but it also makes it a little harder too, because you're always in touch with something. And so I just, you know, the way that you broke everything down, it was just so pleasing because I almost want to throw a check out there saying, man, this was therapy. This was like, I just got some therapy over here free. I'm gonna have to tell Deborah that. I might have kept them at charging me because I just think we're all right now in a circle that we need each other. And this is what's starting to show. We honestly need each other, period. You know, and that's the human contact is always good if you can enjoy it to the point where you actually are pleasing somebody else and you're being pleased, you know, yourself. So I just really wanted to just thank you because you just kind of broke it down in a way that it was just so common knowledge. And
Right.
so a lot of us would not understand it, right, from somebody else's perspective. But the way that you put it, it's real easy to kind of assimilate it all and put it all together and say, okay, this is where this anxiety or this is where my stress is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah, and Curtis, I can hear you. I heard it. And Bill, I heard you too earlier today because I have my headphones on to where I can walk around my house and hear everybody.
Man, you know what? I should have knew better. I thought I was just looking at your picture. You was feeding your son, but okay, Deborah, you got it. You in control here.
I am everywhere. And Valene, you broke it down. I just want to let you know, you broke it down. My husband's even talking about you. And I said, that's my twin.
Well, you know, it's funny, Curtis, I wanted to tell you a little joke because, you know, when we first got out of quarantine, because what they did, what the French government did was they said, okay, we're going to be in quarantine for 2 weeks. Everybody's like, all right, 2 weeks. I could do this standing on my head, 2 weeks. Then at around like 10 days, they were like, okay, two more weeks. And we were like, okay, 2 more weeks, that's fine. Then the third time around, it was like, okay, I'm sorry, guys, but definitely 2 more weeks. But this is what we're gonna do to come out of quarantine. So he 2-weeked us to death. But the third time, he gave us hope. Like, okay, well, at the end of this 2 weeks, this is what we're gonna do to make it so that we can come out. And when we first came out, you know, there were all these jokes. There were all these jokes that we were making, like, it's so nice. It doesn't smell like cigarette smoke outside. It doesn't sound like buses. I mean, it just feels so nice. Can we just let everyone else out but leave the Parisians inside? So that way that it stays like this. And then when we finally got outside and everyone was outside, everyone was so nice, because for those of you that haven't been to Paris, one of the biggest cliches about French people is that they tend to, not French people, Parisians, one of the biggest cliches about Parisian people is that they tend to be a little bit cold and a little bit like reserved into themselves, and you don't make eye contact on the street. None of this LA smiling and waving at people when you cross this, you just go where you gotta go and you mind your business, right? That's a very Parisian way. But when we came out of confinement, everyone was so nice. Everyone was smiling and holding the door and stopping to pet my dog. And I was like, where am I? What city is this? But it just goes to show the lack of contact, human contact. It was so important. Even during the 1 hour I would go out and go to the grocery store. I mean, this lady that has been checking me out for my groceries for the last 6 months would not speak to me one time. And during that confinement, her and I had very lengthy conversations every time I went to the grocery store, you know, just this craving for physical connection, like real live people and not Zoom people, even though I love you Zoom people.
So this brings the questions again. So how do we take this and make it out of something that's better than we left it, right? This is like what I'm trying to think about now. So just like you said, the girl at the grocery store, for whatever she had in her mind, right? Didn't say anything, but all of a sudden now, you know, she's actually becoming cordial to you. So how do we?
I just want to interject because we have 5 minutes left on this, and you have to tell Christina if you want to go into the Q&A and continue this conversation, because I think we have someone else coming up at 1 o'clock. So please let Christina know. Christina, you want to add anything?
No, I was just about to type that. So if anybody wants to come in to the room, just let me know and I can add you. But I did want to say, Curtis, I definitely feel you on the needing people now, because I'm an introvert. And the quarantine happened and I was like, oh my God, I guess I do need to talk to people. I still like being by myself, but I guess like talking to some people is okay. So I definitely understand. And I have a cat and a dog and I talk to them all day. So I totally get that.
Man, I know. I'm feeling you. I'm feeling you.
So if anybody wants to go in, just raise your hand or let me know and I can definitely put in the breakout room.
Also, just to add to what Laura wrote about our furry friends feeling some trauma, I can personally say that my dog definitely went through some emotional changes during the pandemic. It seems like in the beginning, he was very happy that I was home all the time. Then he kind of was looking at me like, what's going on? Did you get laid off? Why are you home all the time? Then he kind of went through this period of like, it seemed like sadness because the walks weren't as frequent, they weren't as long. So he was kind of itching to get outside and was very sort of hyperactive when he would get outside because it's like he knew the time was limited. So it was interesting. And then when it was time to go back to work, he did kind of experience what I would describe as like some like anxiety, like what do you call it? The anxiety.
Separation anxiety?
Separation anxiety, yes. It seems like he was experiencing some separation anxiety because I was leaving and almost like he was worried I wasn't gonna come back. So yes, definitely some anxiety for the dog. The dog needs a psychologist as well. Well, it was great talking to all of you. Thank you so much for having me.
I'll make one comment with 3 minutes left. The one part that you talked about with the domestic violence part really resonated with me because we have noticed, this is kind of a hidden pandemic within a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
The fact of the matter is the predators are trapped at home with the victims and the children are trapped at home with both of them. And even if, of course, they're never touched, these children are being traumatized by whatever they're seeing mom and dad go through and so forth, all this. In other words, it's an extra pandemic inside a pandemic that we've not acknowledged sufficiently, and there isn't any escape. The children don't even have, for example, the safety of a few hours at school that they would normally have. They don't even have that. So this is really, I'm going to mention this later if there's an opportunity, but in case there wasn't, I wanted to say it on this seminar. I don't know if it'll come up as a topic, but you're right on with that. It's a big, big hidden problem that children are at home with their abusers, and of course abusers are stuck home together. So thanks for bringing that up, Valerie.
No, Bill, can I add to what Bill just said, please? If you don't mind, I think we got about a minute or so. But hey, Bill, here's the thing about the commissioners and having this insight. If you guys keep that dialogue going, maybe you'll find a way to reach out to those kids, because you got to find a way to get them to at least come out to say something to you, right? And now the school is not there. And so that's a topic, man, that, I tell you, that's something that you should jump on.
We talk about it a lot. There's no school, there's no church, there's no social events. The kids are trapped at home with the parents. In domestic violence situations, the kids are being abused no matter if they're touched or not.
Yes.
They're being abused. And if they're, of course, have the wrong kind of predator, they may be sexually assaulted and violently assaulted and all that too. So it's a big issue. Big issue.
The house with these pink headphones. Dr. Valene Gresham knows about my pink headphones because we have had many times in France. What time is it there?
It is 10 o'clock and I am starving. So me and the pup are gonna take a 10 p.m. walk home.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in. It has been a pleasure. We will see you tomorrow. As usual, I am so proud of my twin and knowing that I know you. And so we will definitely be chatting tomorrow. And just so that you know, Dr. Gresham has taken on 2 of my wonderful students to mentor them in their dissertations to permit to publish research, which is going to be fabulous. Their topics. What were the 2 topics that they had?
One of them is presenting on mothers who kill their children and
infanticide.
Yes, yes, and the psychopathy behind that. And then we have another one who is doing some research on dating deception and what that looks like.
Yeah. So it's going to be amazing. Like, she has been my little anchor in France, and we were talking like almost every day at one point when we were locked down. So thank you. We will see you tomorrow. Go feed your puppy. He gets in trouble, but that's okay.
No, he's half asleep. We're about to shake him up because he needs to walk. So have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much for having me.
Smooches.
Valene, thank you.